Hello friends, hello professionals, and welcome back to my channel, The Sea of Regulation. My name is Simone Martin, and I am here with one of my installments in The Basics, helping you understand some of the basic elements of financial services regulation and how it impacts you. And if you're curious, thank you for stopping by. I hope you find this useful. Now, before I dive into today's topic, sanctions policies, let me get my usual disclaimer out of the way. I am a financial services regulator. I am not a lawyer and I'm not a professional advisor. And the views on this channel are definitely all my own. They do not represent the views of any regulatory authority or international standards setter or sanctioning body. So with that out of the way, let's dive in. So a sanctions policy. It's a separate document, or it could be an e-file, it could be an electronic document that sets out how a firm will deal with clients, transactions, business, inquiries, anything in relation to sanctions. And more importantly, how they will not breach sanctions. Now, in some jurisdictions, these have different applications. So for a large portion of the planet, they definitely follow United Nations sanctions. And those are issued by the United Nations Security Council. They pass them via resolutions. I'll leave some information in the description below. But what's important about a sanctions policy? And why isn't this a manual per se? You may have a compliance manual that sets out high-level treatment on how to deal with sanctions. But you see, sanctions are updated pretty often. In fact, there are some weeks where I think that everybody's issuing a new sanction, from OFAC to EU to the UN. Sometimes it gets to be a lot. And the sanctioning bodies that you have to have regard for can be quite numerous. If you're operating in Canada, there are a number of authorities there that will issue sanctions in relation to certain activities. Now, the sanctioning body is trying to modify behavior of a particular person or a particular jurisdiction towards something that resembles fair trade and compliance. So no proliferation financing. There's a certain country that's always testing nuclear warheads or something. Yeah, you have sanctions against that particular country. And if you can guess which country I'm talking about, drop it in the comments below. Now, why would you have a sanctions policy? It's because if you're found in breach of sanctions, it can mean the death of your company. You see, regulators are not happy to know that any person in the financial services industry would be willfully breaching sanctions. And if you're willfully breaching sanctions, yeah, the enforcement action can be swift and severe, because what you're doing is helping people who may not be permitted to have that particular service or transaction. Now, in relation to some sanctions, persons are permitted to engage, but you have to seek permission from a particular authority in your jurisdiction. And that is why a sanctions policy is important. So for example, there may be a person named in a sanction. Does it mean that you don't provide services to them? Depends on the nature of the sanction. And you need to be certain on what that sanction says in relation to that person to make sure that you don't breach it. So it may be that they can transact, but every single transaction needs prior approval of the relevant competent authority in your jurisdiction. And that would be captured in a sanctions policy. Of course, that individual might be subject to additional sanctions, so then that permission that you would have to seek is no longer relevant. They're not permitted to do anything, or the sanction could be lifted. And so it's not that they run free and that you do anything. Chances are they would be rated like high risk. You would continue to monitor that situation. But again, your sanctions policy should address these things. And this is a document, again, that staff should be familiar with and know how to review certain transactions and certain clients to make sure that they don't run afoul of sanctions. Now, there are a lot of electronic solutions, search functions. People use basic things like Google search. And I'm not recommending any particular company or search feature, but there are a number of services and service providers that allow for firms to actually scrub their client list to see whether someone has popped up on a sanctions list. And then you can take appropriate action. But your ability to take action relies on the fact that you need to know what to do and know whether you have exposure to a client, a company, or a country, or something else that is subject to sanctions. So I'm going to end it there, keeping it basic for the basics. If you found this helpful, definitely give me a thumbs up. If you want to know more about sanctions and how it integrates with compliance, drop it in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed as yet, I would encourage you to subscribe. Definitely subscribe. And once you've finished subscribing, hit the notification bell, because you'll get notification as to when I drop a video, and no one has to tell you to keep up to date with your compliance, because it's really important. And the consequences for not keeping up with compliance can be dire. So we don't want that. So I'll end it here, and I'll see you in my next video.